Okay, so I'm gonna kind of walk you through what my class looks like for the first trimester, because this is kind of what I do all of first trimester, and it takes that long, and it will take that long. If it doesn't take you that long, you're probably doing something wrong, to be really honest. Like, you're not going to crank this thing out in 3 weeks. And I'm gonna kind of start with this thing. I'm a soccer coach too, and I have to tell my players all the time, because they're not really good about practice. They just want to come to games. We're going to come win a game. You've got to practice, because winning is a habit. It is not something that just happens. What we're going to do in here is a habit that starts in August and stops never. It never, ever stops. If you stop close reading, they will stop too. And they will stop giving you the work that you want. You will get it for 3 weeks when you're teaching it, and then you will stop getting it. It is a habit in here. It is a way of life in this room. And I think that's why my kids buy into it, because they know it's not going to stop. Kids are pretty hardy. They're really resilient. They will put up with a lot of junk you throw their way, because they know it's going to stop sometime, except it doesn't stop in here. So they have to do it. They have to adopt it. It has to become a part of their bones. So this is the first week of school, and I'm going to leave that zoomed in because it's right where I want it. The triangle, the rhetorical triangle, or the Aristotelian triangle, is the first thing we do in this class. The first real work. We open up with the usual things, and we kind of read something really fun and say, I promise I'm not going to bore the pants off of you, but this is how we kind of start. And we start with this rhetorical triangle, because no matter what we read in my class, it's going to have three things. No matter what. There's going to be a message. Obviously, there's a message. It's a speech, a letter, an essay, something. There's going to be someone giving that or writing that speech, letter, or essay, the speaker. And there's going to be an audience. Someone is supposed to hear it, right? It's not the tree in the woods. Someone is supposed to hear it. So no matter what, if you have functioning eyeballs in August, you can pass this class, because this is the beating heart of it. Everything we do in here comes back to this triangle. We look at the message, we look at who's giving it, we look at who's getting it, and all the parts in there. So we start with this triangle, and it's up there on my board because it needs to stay up all year long. If you are lost, you look at the triangle, and it's up there. You know, if you look at the speaker, the audience, and what's going on in the message, and you see it, and that is just the backbone of this class. It's just everything that they need. So this is what we do first. So this kind of plays into how we do our close reading a little later. It plays into what informs it. Just so you're not going to close read week one. They don't have you have to operate like they have nothing. Okay, so we operate with that. We start here. We give them this background, and we do a little reading, very light, identifying the speaker, identifying the message, identifying who's supposed to get it, and all that. What you have in front of you, this triangle, they do not get. Do not give them this. If you give them this, they'll go, great, and they'll never look at it again. They have to, I don't even give them a blank one. They draw their own in their notes, because it comes out of their little brain, through their little hand, and onto a piece of paper. And it's not just something that they know, it's something that they have done. And then we fill it in as we talk about the pieces. You can't cover all this information in 12 weeks. In fact, if you covered it in the first 2 trimesters, or maybe in the year, you're an all-star. This is hard. And it goes a long way. And we fill it in as we get to the pieces. And it becomes an exercise in note-taking and note-keeping for them. Because I'll say, go to your triangle, and they'll flip back in their binder, and they'll find August 28th, and they will go, all right, time to fill in persona, because we're talking about persona this week. And they'll fill it in, and that goes in the speaker section, because that is a part of a speaker. Ronald Reagan, President Ronald Reagan, their midterm was the Challenger explosion speech that night, And they all tried to say the speaker is President Ronald Reagan, and I wouldn't let them. They were supposed to say the speaker was human being Ronald Reagan. He was not giving the speech as president. He was not using presidential authority. He was speaking as a human being who was an American and witnessed the Challenger explosion, just like Tim Jones, 183 Grinstead, right? He was just like them. That was his persona, human being. So that goes in the speaker section. They have to understand that these things have nuances. And we start expanding our definitions and we start coming out. I will say one thing. Ethos is a problem I see in my class often. They are really bad at ethos because there are teachers who have told them that ethos is ethical appeal. And it is right and wrong. That is just wrong. It is the speaker's credibility or authority, and I get them away from right and wrong and someone talking about right and wrong, and I get them thinking about this speaker is responsible for conveying a message. Why should I listen to him? Why do I care what this human being has to say? Because they are appealing to some authority or credibility. They are saying, I have done my research, I am a professor, I am a professional author, I am a president, I am a dictator, something. It is not right and wrong, and that's using this triangle and making sure we use ethos, pathos, and logos the correct way is really big, and that's kind of the first couple weeks. So they have that kind of a background when we start working. Okay? Any questions on that? We're gonna kind of scoot. All right. I ran out of time my last session because I talk. The next thing we kind of go over is these rhetorical terms and strategies. So you have a two-sided piece of paper. One side says rhetorical terms and strategies, anecdote at the top and satire on the other side at the top. After we kind of get the framework of the exigence or the occasion for someone giving some sort of speech, letter, or essay, we kind of talk about the things that they use. If you think of our triangle as the house, these rhetorical terms and strategies are our furniture. Some essays or some houses have lots of couches and televisions in them. Some do not. Some may have a lot of figurative language and some won't. Some will have none. So we but everything we read is always a house. There's always a message, a speaker, and an audience. So these are the things we kind of go over after, and it's long. And I have 8 more of these, right? There's 400 Latin phrases and terms for all these crazy rhetorical strategies like zeugma and anaphora, and it just goes on. And they're all crazy, and the kids will never remember them. But these are the big ones. I go over anecdote a lot. It is something that just kind of pops up often. It's just kind of how human beings tend to speak with experience or the experience of others. So anecdote's a big one. Diction is a very, very big one. All the figurative language is very big. Mode, I kind of deal with in trimester 2. It's not something I do early. That tends to be something that they do when they write. When we apply, we talk about mode, like write a narrative or write a persuasive article, things like that. Rhetoric, of course, is very, very big. Shift is huge for us. Tone shift, shift in points of view, audience shift. Any time you see a change, we're really, really big on that. That's a big one for us. We stay on it. Satire is something we do a little later because it's very specific. Syntax we pay a little bit of attention to, but really at a simple level. Long, short, punctuation is big for us. And then tone. Tone is really, really big for us. Anytime you hear a tone change or a certain tone being used, that's really big for us. So the ones I mentioned, tone and some syntax and figurative language, diction, rhetoric, and shift, that's kind of trimester 1 stuff. If you're kind of looking about where we start these ideas. That's kind of what is in their toolbox right now as we're close reading. And we go over all these. They need them for the exam. They need to be able to find anaphora because it is on the multiple choice for AP. And let me say this. If you don't teach AP, awesome. That's great. You don't need to. This is for every single class. If they're reading, they should be close reading, just like this. Every class, non-readers to autodidacts. all the way. They should be doing this. Okay? And if your kids are never going to get juxtaposition, it's never going to happen, that's fine. Never teach it. Don't do it. Focus on what you need to focus on. Don't worry about it. Okay? These are just tools. This is just kind of what's in my toolbox. And if you don't need that wrench, don't use that wrench. But you still have the toolbox. Okay? So that's just kind of the tools and the terms that we go on to. And now we're going to kind of look at close reading. So we kind of start with this background, the vocab we need to close read, the principles and concepts we need to close read. Because I assume, I don't care who comes in my room, Billy or Bobby, if they come in my room, I'm assuming they have never been taught anything that happens in my class before. I don't know. With the turnover in kids and the turnover in teachers and just all that stuff, you just don't know. You don't know. Teach them what you know they need to have, and then go from there. Okay? So then we get to this kind of close reading part. And we're reading the whole time. We definitely read while we're doing the vocab. I will say this. You can't teach this vocab on an island. You can't just have them doing vocab quizzes. They won't get it. They never will. It's got to be meaningful. And you can't teach all 30 figurative language in a week. What I do is I find one piece of writing that is really, really good at one or two things. And that's it. That's all we talk about. Now, of course, there's more things in there. But if I want to talk about imagery and diction for these 2 weeks, I'm going to be using a piece or two. And we're going to look at two things, imagery and diction, and that's it. Now, you'll have the Timmy in the back who says, Mr. Markert, I found juxtaposition, hyperbole, allusion, and I found all these, and we're not talking about them. You're right. We'll get there. Thank you for noticing. You're awesome. You want to talk about them after class? We'll do that. But I'm not worried about them because it's not on the quiz, and Bobby up here doesn't get it. So we're going to help Bobby. And they get it, and the smart kids are always kind of the polite ones too. They're going to be like, all right, yeah. They just want to be recognized. Great job. We're moving. And then you move on, and you make sure that they get what they need to get before you move. Okay, so close reading strategies. This part is just kind of the stuff that we can look for, the close reading strategies, all this big chunky guy up top. That's just everything we can look for. Questions we can ask ourselves. When is description subjective? When is their opinion coming in? What effect? Those are all questions the kid needs to ask themselves. We're going to move on. I kind of show that to them. I give that to them, and I say, look, ask yourself questions when you read. Because if you can ask that question, that means there's something there. You don't even have to be able to answer it. But if you can ask yourself a question, you're recognizing that the author is doing something. And there's a lot of questions in that big chunky guy up top. There's a lot of things in each piece of writing. There's a lot. Too often kids go, I couldn't find anything. Because you didn't ask yourself any of these questions. Not one. If you couldn't find anything, you didn't ask a question. So if you need to ask yourself a question, here's your little question bank. Go back. Find something. There is no, I couldn't find anything. Okay? This is just kind of the toolbox for them. These are questions you can ask. But here's the part that's really big. Let's boil it down to something that makes sense for us. Right here at the bottom. What does it mean? All the way from the smallest piece of writing, or piece in the writing, to the whole passage. All the way from a semicolon, what does that semicolon mean, all the way to what does it mean, title to final period. What does it mean? They have to ask themselves that. And I make them answer questions. They will have to write paragraphs and papers about what does one semicolon mean. I am the meanest English teacher on the planet because they have to write, at some point in the year, they will write an explanation on a semicolon. Why use a semicolon and not a period? I am not playing. And they will sit there and they'll go, we'll use a semicolon because it's two independent clauses. Nope. Why use a semicolon? Because I could have used a period there. Or I could have used a fanboy with a comma there. Why do that? And they have to explain it. What does that mean? Not just a summary. What does that word mean? That sentence, that paragraph, those two paragraphs together, those three paragraphs together, those four, all the way up to the whole thing. Every single level has meaning. And I make that very clear to them. Okay? So what does it mean is like the first question they have to ask themselves, from the smallest minutia to the biggest idea. How does it make meaning? How does that semicolon make meaning? Well, he used a semicolon because what came before it and what comes after it are put on even terms. That's what a semicolon does. He didn't use a comma because it's not one sentence. He wants them separate ideas. He didn't use a period because he wants to relate them together, and they're even. They have equal weight. That's what a semicolon does. They will learn that. That's how a semicolon makes meaning. So anytime we see, if you too often kids, especially I teach juniors, so I kind of look at how do I step up kids from a sophomore year. So kids come from sophomore year and they just summarize a lot. They summary. This means this. Okay, how? You tell me that Frankenstein is all about man versus science or whatever. Great. How? How is that built? How does that semicolon make meaning? And we talked about that. So not only what does it mean, but how does it make that meaning to happen in your brain? And then this is the big word. You want to circle choice right here. That is a huge word for my class and hopefully for yours. Too often kids think writing is magical. It's just something that happens because it's been put in front of them their entire life. They read the back of cereal boxes, right? Hopefully they're trying to find a toy inside, right? But they have been reading their whole life. They've never understood that that's someone's job. They just think it happens. Someone's job is to write something worth printing. They don't understand that what is in front of them, and I use this word to make it very clear, what is in front of them survived. Because it went through multiple revisions. So if I look at this word here, narration, why did that word survive? Why not telling or something? Why is what they're reading there? Because if it's there, it means it survived. It didn't get cut. So there's some meaning there. There was a choice. The author had the choice. They sat there and they looked at it word by word and said, yep, I choose to keep you. I choose to keep you. And you're gone. I chose to get rid of you. Everything is a choice. Everything. So then the next level is, what does it mean? Well, how did it make it? Why did they make that choice? Why is that choice the choice they used to make that meaning? So that's just kind of, here's the mantra for close reading. If I'm reading closely, I can talk about what it means. I can talk about how it made that meaning. I can talk about what choices survived to make that meaning and why they were the good ones instead of other ones. Why use imagery and not diction, or why use parallelism instead of subjective clauses or things like that. Why use these things? Why use coordination and a positive? Why use those? Why do those? So that's something we do. On the back is just kind of the language of analysis. This is kind of like transitioning into the work that happens because of close reading. I'm not going to really go over this, but these are things that we talk about, words we use, how to transition in our writing. It just kind of happens to be on the back of this note or this page in my binder, so I'm just kind of like, yeah, I could use it. It'll be great. So that's just kind of some analysis words. One big thing, this is really, 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 really helpful for me in my class. Instead of, kids always want to say, to show. They do this to show. They do this to say. They do this to. Encourage them. Force them to use these words. They don't know what to show means, and they don't know what to say means. But if they say, this author resists, they know what resist means. Someone is pressing against something. So if they find diction, and they can say that this diction resists something, they can automatically talk about it in a more meaningful way than to show. This diction shows what? It doesn't show anything. It resists something. These verbs are huge. If you're getting terrible writing, it's because they're doing terrible reading. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Cool? Awesome. Let's move. And then the last part, we'll get to the text in just a second. This last part is just kind of the work of analysis after a close reading. I find it very helpful for me. You may find it very helpful for you. You may find some things in there you could use. There's all these tips in here about body paragraphs and what to do with what. Use it all. Use a tiny bit. Use none of it. One thing I am really, really big on, and I want to say this before we move on. Please understand, I'm not trying to prescribe anything. I understand we all have different classrooms, from non-readers to non-English speakers all the way up to everything. And whatever works, works. And we know we are the professionals in the room. We're going to look at The Fix from Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. I will say this. This is kind of a narrative piece. I do teach nonfiction. It's all nonfiction, but it doesn't mean it has to be boring. That kills me. They will get Gettysburg Address. They will get the Declaration of Independence. They will get all that stuff. They've already done the speech at Tilbury from Queen Elizabeth I. but they also get the fun stuff. They get the Hunter S. Thompson. They get the Annie Dillard. They get fun essays. You got to mix it up. If you don't mix it up and you hit them with Gettysburg early, they're done in August. And if you don't mix it up, they don't get anything hard that shows up on the exams that shows up. Gettysburg is everywhere. So they get it. They get the inaugural. They get the I Have a Dream, of course. They get that stuff. But you got to change it up. You got to find the fun nonfiction. And it's fun trying to find it, too. And if you don't have ideas for fun nonfiction, email me. I have a ton. I have a monster binder of stuff I've hunted down. Okay. And I was a big nonfiction hater for the longest time. And I've come around. Alrighty, let's go. So we kind of had the background. This is kind of like, what we're going to do here is kind of like week 8 stuff. I mean, it's pretty late. And it never stops. It just doesn't stop. We keep doing it. And I always, always, always read everything that happens in my class. It comes onto their desk, and I say, this is what we're doing today. And then, of course, but everything that happens in the room, I read out loud to them. They cannot read the way that you can. They can't. They do not have the voice in their head with pace and inflection that you have. They read like this. I have no intention of inflicting all my childhood memories on anyone for less do it. They don't even see punctuation. It makes a whoosh sound as it flies by them. Right? That's what punctuation sounds like to them. I read to them. I give them the voice. They have no option other than to hear it the way it was meant to be heard. It always, always happens in my class. Will they have homework where they have to read on their own? Yes. Will they have to do the test on their own? Yes. Will they be responsible at the highest and most rigorous level? Yes. But hopefully by May, there's a little voice in their head that now has a name called Mr. Markert, who reads everything to them in their head, and they hear it. Because we hear it. We hear things that sound funny. We can hear diction. We can hear the tone shift. We can hear that stuff. They don't hear it. They just see words. So I try to give them a voice. Okay? So everything that happens in class, I read out loud to them. I'm not going to read out loud to you. I think we have that voice. But when I annotate, I read one time out loud, they get the whole picture, and we kind of do a small discussion. I try to keep the discussion very minimal because I don't want to kill the annotation discussion. I don't just get up here and go, I found this, I found this. It's not a seek and find. It's a discussion. It's a what did you notice? So I'm going to ask a lot of questions from you. Hopefully you respond. And the annotation in class looks like interviewing. I'm going to interview the kids about the text. And just for example, let's do the first sentence. Obviously, the X's are gone. The fixed from Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. I have no intention of inflicting all my childhood memories on anyone. And I'll stop. What word is weird in that sentence? Inflicting. That is a strange word. And I'll linger on it a little bit. When I read it out loud, I'll say, I have no intention of inflicting. And the kids will go, oh, he changed his voice there. That's a word. And they'll say it, because I'm guiding them. They get guided, but I don't hold their hand. So they'll say inflicting. I have no intention of inflicting. That's a weird word. It's a painful word. What's being inflicted? Memories. Childhood memories. They've somehow this is a weapon. And I'll ask them, write it down. And kids are really good at taking notes. They love it, because that means they don't have to think. They'll write it down. Make them write it. Because it's there when we need it. And we will need it in a minute. So, inflicting. She's like weaponized childhood memories. That's really strange. Far less do I want to excoriate. I don't know what that word means. You know what that word means? Yeah, I didn't know it either. It means to denounce. And we always look it up. Kids don't know how to use dictionaries. Or they do because their middle school teacher made them do a bunch of definitions. They don't remember them. They'll remember excoriate. I still have kids that remember excoriate because I ask them in the hallway, what's excoriate mean? To denounce. They remember it because they learned it from their reading, not from a word bank. And I look it up. Never be afraid to say, I don't know. Because you're teaching them that they're supposed to know everything. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. I teach them I'm going to find out. I don't want to excoriate my old teachers who, in their bungling, unforgettable way, exposed me to the natural world. A world covered in chitin. Now, I know what that word means because I took biology. That's the hard, and they didn't know what it means, though, hard exoskeleton of insects. Okay? And we write it down. We write it down. Margins are there for a reason. I try to make margins on everything I do. I sat there and I copied this book and I cut out the little pages I copied and I glued them somewhere and I margins, I want them nice and tight. And oh yeah, they need them because we're going to use them. A world covered in chitin where implacable realities hold sway. The Polyphemus moth never made it to the past. Okay, so I kind of have like this subject here, the Polyphemus moth. That's strange. She's just popping up. Never made it to the past. It crawls in that crowded, pellucid pool at the lip of the great waterfall. So I didn't know what that word meant. Never heard that word before in my life. It just means translucent or transparent. It just means you can see through it. That's it. So I got a new word. I still have kids who know what pellucid means. At the lip of the great waterfall. It is as present as this blue desk and brazen lamp, as this blackened window before me in which I can no longer see even the white string that binds the egg case to the hedge, but only my own pale, astonished face. What did you see there? What is that? What's going on in those few sentences? Huh? I heard it. Imagery. Good. And see, the class, you got to get your class comfortable. We spend a lot of time talking, and I wait forever the first couple weeks. I just sit here and stare at them. And it's weird, and we crack jokes. But by week 8, we're chatting. Because they know I'm going to wait. So, and I also noticed this. They get used to noticing patterns. Blue, black, white, and pale. Imagery. Repetition of color. And we take that little note. This is a pattern that we've noticed. A repetition of color. Do we know why? Nope. But in case I need to, I got my note. I'm ready to talk about it. Moving on. Once, when I was 10 or 11 years old, put the brakes on. I already know what this is, and my kids already know what this is because we've talked about it before. This is a what? Does anyone know? It's an anecdote. It is a small, contained story meant to illustrate some idea. And it's always signaled with once, or once upon a time, or I remember when, or my friend Billy went to the market. Something. And they get used to recognizing that. So we circle words like that. And I don't know if it happens in this piece, but I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. If you see this word, I make a big deal about this. If you see the word but, and the kids all snicker because they're immature, and I've taught them that. They snicker because it's fun. You want them to have fun. If you see the word but, you circle the buts. Circle all the buts. Because it always, always, always is an indicator of shifts. Always, always, always circle buts. So they get used to seeing these keys. They get used to seeing these things aren't magic. They have indicators. They have big alert signs that say, I'm here. An anecdote says once upon a time, or I remember, or there was this one time, or I know I heard about this once, or but. I went to the market, but I was busy. So I had plans, but now I don't. There is a change. There's a shift. My friend Judy brought in a Polyphemus moth cocoon. Okay, he's back. It was January. What's weird about that sentence? It was January. Say again? Passive, okay, it's passive voice. It was January. What else? It's very simple. It's not hard. Obvious question. What's weird about that sentence? Or what do you notice about that sentence, maybe? It's very short. It's almost as short as a sentence can be. Subject, verb. It's one word longer than the shortest sentence could be. It was January. That's not a mind-boggling annotation. It's just short. And we talk about it, and we say that short sentences always try to get something across to us very clearly. The author wants no ifs, ands, or circled buts about it. They just don't. They want you to understand it's January. Why is that weird for a cocoon? Huh? Spring. Cocoons open in spring. It ain't spring. It's January. I have kind of like the beginnings of a problem here. Even nonfiction has problems. And to keep going back to Gettysburg Address, the Gettysburg Address has problems. It's called the Civil War. Slavery. There's a problem there. There's a problem. There were doily snowflakes taped to the schoolroom panes. The teacher kept the cocoon in her desk all morning. and brought it out when we were getting restless before recess. So I have this we. Who is we? The students, including Annie Dillard, or whoever the narrator is. The kids always say the narrator is the author. The narrator of Pilgrim at Tinker Creek is kind of Annie Dillard or someone else. There's some papers that say it's a male narrator, but who knows? We just know they're involved. In a book, we found what the adult moth would look like. It would be beautiful. Again, a very short sentence. She wants to get something across to you. And what's like the most important word or the second most important word in that sentence? There's only 4. Wood and beautiful. It was going to be. Man, I can't wait. Is it yet? Nope. Wood is important. It's in there. It makes up a 4-word sentence. She could have said it was beautiful. She didn't, though. It's a choice. With a wingspread of up to 6 inches, the Polyphemus is one of the few huge American silk moths, much larger than, say, a giant or tiger swallowtail butterfly. The moth's enormous... Oh, I notice a pattern here. Huge. Enormous. Wings are velveted in a rich, warm brown and edged in bands of blue and pink, delicate as a watercolor wash. Wow. What a sentence. What are some key words in that sentence? Just shout them out at me. I'm not a big hand raiser guy. I'm not in my classroom. I don't want to put anything on pause. I want them just getting it out there. What's going on in there? What words are just important? Very basic. Color again. I got blue and I got pink. What other words are vivid or important? Velveted. Velveted. You remember when you were a kid and you felt velvet and you're like, oh, this is different than cotton. This feels nice. Right? And then watercolor wash. Very pretty, bright. What else? How about this? Rich, warm. A startling eye spot. Immense. There's some more. More ideas of bigness, hugeness, immenseness. And deep blue. There it is again. See, we just notice patterns. Annotation is all about noticing patterns and the choices that we need them to see. Not strategies or techniques. Just choices and patterns in those choices. Deep blue melding to an almost translucent yellow. There's the idea of translucence again, and another color. It doesn't stop. Luxuriates. It's a $1 billion word right there. If ever a kid asks me what a word means, I know it's important. Right? I don't know what that word means. It's because it's important. And you don't know it. It's a fancy word, right? It's a $5 word. That's why you don't know it. That's why it's important. Luxuriates in the center of each hind wing. The effect is one of a masculine splendor. Wow. Foreign to the butterflies. A fragility unfurled to strength. So I've got a contradiction here. And what is that? What is kind of a contradiction that's close together? Juxtaposition is one phrase we could put there. Let me write that down. I would also say this is kind of an oxymoron. They're too close together. You cannot be fragile and strong. You cannot unfurl fragility to strength. You can't. Fragility doesn't unfurl. If you are fragile, and you're going to be fragile. So we have fragile all of a sudden moving to strong. It's kind of an oxymoron. Something is changing. There's a shift. There's a juxtaposition. The Polyphemus moth in that picture looked like a mighty, there's more strength again, wraith. And they always ask, what's a wraith? And I'm gonna define that in a minute because it is important to us. We define every word we don't know. Every single one. And I'm going to define it in just a second. A beating essence of the hardwood forest. Alien skin and brown with spread blind eyes. And we're going to come up here and we're going to define wraith really quickly. And they write it right on there. Everything stays in their notes. A wraith, and I'm just going to give it to you, is a, spirit. Or ghost is the kid-friendly way. A spirit or ghost of a living person who predicts, and this is the part that matters, who predicts death. who predicts death. It's not just a ghost. It comes and it appears to you and someone's dead. Someone is dying. Watch out. It is not a friend. So I've got this strange sentence. Just look at all the words we've circled. Huge, velveted, enormous, rich, warm, immense, luxuriates, splendor, mighty, and then great. Something kind of terrifying in there. Something really scary. Strange. And then brown. This was the giant moth packed in the faded cocoon. Again, we kind of have the oxymoron again, right? If it's giant, you can't really pack it into something. It just doesn't work. It's just like, ugh, it doesn't fit. We closed the book and turned to the cocoon. It was an oak leaf sewn into a plump oval bundle. Judy had found it loose in a pile of frozen leaves. And now we talk about the paragraph. I always kind of stop after paragraphs and talk about it. Because if they don't get that paragraph, they're not going to get the next one. Stop. Slow, slow, slow. What do we see a lot of in here? You circled it. Look at your circles. Don't look at her words. Look at what you wrote. What do you see a lot of? Descriptions, yes. So we have more imagery and descriptive images. What else? We circled a lot of single words, and we know word choice is? Diction. Yep. And this is practice. This is a habit. This happens all the time. They won't be comfortable the first time, but they'll recognize that when I circle words, I'm getting ready to ask about diction. And when they circle words, when they see it, it's because they're circling diction. It becomes muscle to them. It is not a fact to know. It is not a Jeopardy question. It is in their hand. It is what they do. I make everything they're supposed to learn something that they do. So it's diction, but you can't just say diction. So what kind of diction? What is it? It is always blank diction or blank tone. What are we saying? What kind of blank diction is this? What is it? Positive. At the very least, it is positive. And I say positive how? Make a relationship. Diction is all about making relationships and connotations. And let's just look at our words again. And I say they always want to do the whole, well, wings are velveted. No. Look at just what's circled, just a few. Velvet, rich, warm, luxuriates, splendor. What is this? What kind of diction is that? What are those relationships? What do you think of? What do you see in your head? You don't see a moth. What do you see? Materials. Huh? Materials? What kind? Rich, warm, velvet, luxury, splendor, expensive, royal, rich. Perfect. And when they write their analysis for the AP exam, I'll say, any one of those words, can that word work as a description too? Can you kind of have some writing style and borrow Annie Dillard's word to describe your diction? And they'll go, yeah, rich. So you're telling me she uses rich diction? That's wonderful. Put rich in quotes, and now all of a sudden you've got an embedded quote that analyzes your diction. That's awesome. That's style. That's also a way of kind of cheap style. Things that they can do helps when they go, I can't think of a word for diction. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Pick one of those that could also work as a description. Now I can't say velvet diction. That ain't gonna work. But they get that. They get that. They could say warm diction. They could say warm diction. They really can, and they will, and that's okay. I think that sounds great. Warm diction, don't you? All right. We passed the cocoon around. We're moving. It was heavy. Short sentence again. As we held it in our hands, the creature within warmed and squirmed. And last section, I got a question. And squirmed is a word I would have circled. And right about now, it couldn't have been more perfect. Someone asks, how do you teach diction? Like, how does that work? How is a kid supposed to know squirmed is something they're supposed to circle? And I ask them a question. I say, what's a synonym for squirm? Wiggle. Kids wiggle on Halloween because they got a bag full of candy. They wiggling. Why? Why are they wiggling? They're excited. They're really happy. Do you squirm when you're happy? No, you do not. When do you squirm? When you are nervous. This is what kind of diction? At the very minimum. Negative. But also make them use a different word, and you said it. This is nervous. And we just went from positive royal, rich, to squirming. What is that? This is a shift. I need to make that eye really dark. We're going to get in trouble. I'm on camera. So we've got a shift here. This thing is squirming. This is not, it's not wiggling. It's not happy. It's January. There's a shift here. There's a change. And they notice that. That's how I teach it. Could another word go there? Yeah. What word could go there? That. Why not that one? Well, because diction. That's how I teach it. Synonyms. And why they don't choose the synonym. Why they chose that word. And we're back to that one word again I emphasized. Choice. Choice. That word is the $1 million word, and it's so simple, and kids will get it. Choice. We were delighted. Well, that's opposite of squirming. So I've got like opposite sides here. This is a really strange situation, and they won't get it. They'll go, a kid's holding a cocoon. However, one is uncomfortable, and one is delighted. Strange. And wrapped it tighter in our fists. The pupa began to jerk violently. And here's another way I teach diction. If you see an adverb, it's diction. Stephen King says the road to hell is paved with adverbs. And it is. Adverbs are terrible, except when they survive. Violently. It didn't jerk quickly or sharply or horrendous. It jerked violently. And we'll see why that word in a minute. Heart-stopping knocks. So kind of deadly diction there. Who's there? It's a strange little interjection of the narrator. It's very strange. I just asked the question. I don't know. I don't get that sentence. I really don't. Kid go, why is that there? I don't know. You know what? I'm going to ignore it. I'm moving on. I don't care. I can't answer that question, so I'm going to focus on what I can answer. Too often kids get hung up on something they don't get. Show them that they don't have to be hung up on something that they don't get. I do not get that sentence. I never will, and I don't care. Moving on. I can still feel those thumps. Urgent through a muffling of spun silk and leaf. Urgent. Well, that's easy. Repetition of urgency. Nervousness. Violence. I'm already on edge. I'm on the edge of my seat. Urgent through the swaddling of many years against the curve of my palm. We kept passing it around. When it came to me again, it was hot as a bun. What's that? There you go. It's a simile. And it's positive. Food is positive. We love food. Hot as a bun. Positive. It jumped half out of my hand. The teacher intervened. And I'm going to bracket this one. And some of you probably thought out there, just like my kids do, why bracket it? We'll get there. But it's short. We know that at the very least. The teacher intervened. I've got these two sides. I've got this cocoon. I've got these kids. But now I've got this swooping in of someone. The teacher intervened. And I'm going to put that in brackets just because I know, and I'm going to guide my class to where I want them to go, and they know to pay attention to it. But I'm not going to give them what they want. I'm going to move on. She put it, still heaving and banging. Those are some good words. In the ubiquitous mason jar. And here's what happens. I don't know what that word means. Let's find out. And we go to our dictionary, and I show them how they have to find words. They need to interact. They cannot skip words. Now, if they can context clue it, great. They better be right. I ask them. If they're not, they go find it. And they know where to go. They know all the dictionaries are right down there, and I usually keep a couple on my desk, but I cleaned up. So they can just go grab them. They know they have to. What does ubiquitous mean? Omnipresent. Yeah, everywhere. I'm going to also put this, or seeming to be. Okay, I'm going to get a little risky here in a second, so forgive me in advance. And I ask kids this, just because I want them to see the connotation here. This is a teaching moment for me, and I say, someone give me an event, and I'm going to use the one from class, for better or for worse. And someone goes, a car show, and I'm like, awesome, that's a great event to use. What is always at a car show that you just love to see, that is positive, that it's always there? And they go, awesome cars. I'm like, you're right, awesome cars are always at the car show. And then I go, what's the bad part of car show that's always there? Fat white guys. You're right. I'm probably going to get in trouble. Well, get my resume cleaned up tonight. Anyway, but that's what they said, and they're right. It's always there, and it's not the good side. Ubiquitous can go either way. It can be the always negative thing that's there, the always positive things there. It's always my parents who are there for me. It's always the creepy neighbor. Right? I don't know. So, it's always seeming to be, it's positive or negative. I don't know yet. We'll read on. Positive or negative. And it's like this weird subject, this weird mason jar. It was coming. There's no stopping it now. January or not. So I've got like this repetition of my idea from January where I thought it was weird earlier, that weird three-word sentence. It's back. It's back. And I'm noticing. I don't know why I'm noticing. I just am. January or not. One end of the cocoon dampened and gradually frayed in a furious battle. We've arrived, haven't we? Violently, urgent, squirmed, heaving, banging, battle, furious. What is this? What is it? What do those things have in common? Yeah, a war, battle, fight. And it's all single words, so this is blank diction. What kind of diction is this? Negative at the very least, but it is a battle diction or warlike diction, combative, violent. And they can put violent in quotes. They can borrow words. This is how we talk about diction. We don't invent the wheel. We let the author did it. Let the author do it again. Violent diction. Furious diction. The whole cocoon twisted and slapped around in the bottom of the jar. The teacher fades. The classmates fade. I fade. All three of these things fade back. What's left? The cocoon. I don't remember anything. But that thing struggle. We're still there. We've gone from beautiful diction to violent diction. Another shift. They things struggle to be a moth or, and we finally arrived, die trying. That's big. All she remembers is this fight or die trying. It emerged at last, a sodden crumple. And they go, I don't know what that word means. And I'm like, that's fine. It means thoroughly soaked. And I'm like, wait a second. It was damp down here too. So that's another pattern. You're allowed to go back. Kids don't want to go back. Make them go back. They got to go back. If they miss something, go back. Okay? So we have a sodden crumple. Why is it wet? What's going on there? I asked myself that question. It was a male. His long antennae were thickly plumed, as wide as his fat abdomen. His body was very thick, over an inch long. So I got thick, fat abdomen, over an inch long and deeply furred. A gray, fur-like plush covered his head. A long, tan, fur-like hair hung from his wide, there's wide again, thorax over his brown-furred, segmented abdomen. His multi-jointed legs, pale and powerful, were shaggy as a bear's. What's all that? Same rhetorical choice. What is it that we've seen so far? Yeah, so we've got colors again, and we see colors, so we know that the rhetorical choice is imagery. Now, can I ask you a question? Go back to where we saw some color imagery before. What colors did you see? Blue, pink, yellow. What do we got now? Brown, tan, gray. This is the worst moth ever, right? You had me all built up, Annie, and you let me down. And the kids go, wait a second. She did that. Why is this moth different? And that's a good question. This is irony. Kids think about it. They go, it's not ironic. It is. You were expecting something. Annie Dillard gave you an expectation. And irony is not unfortunate happenstance. It's the opposite of something that was expected. Rain on your wedding day, and I love this. I love making fun of Alanis Morissette in my class. Rain on your wedding day is not irony. It's unfortunate. A no smoking sign on your cigarette break is not irony. It is unfortunate. However, if you were getting married in the desert where the expectation is zero precipitation, and then it rains, well, that's ironic. She has no irony built up in her song. There's no irony built up. They must have an expectation. And Annie Dillard built up for us an expectation. And this is how I kind of introduce irony. Irony is kind of an upper level thing. And we save that for later. Imagery we can see right off. Diction we can hear right off. Tone shift we can hear right off. Irony and things come later. But I introduce it and we just leave it there. And then later on, in a month from now, when I go over irony, Timmy in the back is going to go, hey, I remember irony. It's the opposite of what's expected. And he feels like an all-star, and I make him feel like an all-star, and we learn. Moving on. He stood still, but he breathed. Oh, we circled the butts. We circled the butts. He stood still. And we look at both sides of the butt. And the kids all snicker. It's fun. We stood still, but he breathed. Why would there be a but there? Something that signals a change, signals an opposite, signals an instead of. What's the idea before the but? Death. Did you say death? But he's alive. We have this death alive idea going on. Wait, this butterfly or moth just came out of the cocoon. He can't be dead. He just came out. But she has this idea of death in our minds already. It was not an accident. It was created from this but, this tone shift of dead to alive. And we found it because a kid who will laugh because you told him to circle the butts will never forget it, and he just found tone shift. It can say something incredibly intelligent about a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 word sentence. That's awesome. That's awesome. He couldn't spread his wings. There was no room. Why was there no room? The mason jar. And what do we say about that ubiquitous mason jar? It could be positive or it could be negative. What do we know now? It is a negative mason jar. There was no room. The chemical that coated his wings like varnish, stiffening them permanently, dried and hardened his wings as they were. He was a monster in a mason jar. And this is such a great paragraph. I just fly through it, right? He was a monster in a mason jar. Those huge, and we have that idea again, wings stuck on his back in a torture of random pleats and folds, wrinkled as a simile, a dirty tissue, rigid as a simile, leather. They made a single nightmare clump, still racked with useless, frantic convulsions. And I fly through that sentence because they need to hear how awesome that sentence is. They have to learn to love language like you do. That's why they hate reading. They don't like language like you do. Show them. Show them. Monster, torture, nightmare, racked, useless, frantic convulsions. What's that sound like? Struggle. The idea of struggle is in full force here. And I teach juniors, and our sophomores read Frankenstein here. And I ask kids, really think about this. And I say monster and torture and convulsions. And someone inevitably every year, that all-star, says Frankenstein. And that is totally intentional from Annie Dillard. It is not an accident in the slightest. Because did the monster just pop into being like that in Frankenstein? Did he just appear one day, knock on somebody's door? What's the story there? He was created. This moth was not supposed to be this way. He was not supposed to be brown, gray, or tan. He was not supposed to be a monster, tortured, nightmaric, convulsing. He was not. He was created by what? What created this moth? Put everything together. We just talked about it. The students, maybe. The teacher and the restraints, which is the mason jar. Very good. And kids have this huge moment of, oh man, they did this. The next thing I remember, it was recess. What? How do I go from Frankenstein to recess? What is that? Huh? It's a shift. Regardless of how you feel about it, what you want to call it, tone shift, setting shift, audience, whatever kind of shift, there is a shift, there is something happening. We go from torture, she used the word torture, to, next thing I remember is recess. The school was in Shadyside, a busy residential part of Pittsburgh. Everyone was playing dodgeball on the fence. Wow, what a 180. And they hear that. Everyone was playing dodgeball in the fenced playground or racing around the concrete schoolyard by the swings. Next to the playground, a long delivery drive sloped downhill to the sidewalk and street. What's all this? Imagery. Very good. Very good. And you can kind of tell when I'm doing Annie Dillard, when I'm doing the Annie Dillard unit, It's all about diction. It's all about imagery. It's very intentional. It's very focused. And kids will say things like, what about the irony? Don't worry about it. We're not worried about it. I'm teaching you guys how to look at, think about, write about, analyze imagery and diction. Because Andy Dillard's the best. So we move on. Next to the playground, someone, it must have been the teacher, and this is syntax. These dashes, strange. She interrupts herself. Someone, it must have been the teacher, had let the moth out. I was standing in the driveway, so the narrator's back to the singular. I was standing in the driveway alone, stock still, but, we circle them. And what happens on the first side and the opposite side of the but? Stock still and shivering. Can you do those at the same time? No. If you are shivering, you are not stock still. This is an oxymoron. This is yet another contradiction. Yet another contradiction. This is yet another contradiction created by diction. He heaved, that's quite a word, himself down the asphalt driveway by infinite degrees. And they say, huh, what? That just means very slowly. Very slowly. And infinite. Unwavering. His hideous, we're back to that, crumpled wings lay glued and rucked, we looked that up, on his back, perfectly still now. So this idea of stillness, like a collapsed tent. So we have a simile. The bell rang twice, I had to go. The moth was receding down the driveway, dragging on. There's another good verb. I went. There's the shortest sentence in the whole piece. I went. I ran inside. The polyphemus moth is still crawling down the driveway. Crawling down the driveway hunched. Crawling down the driveway on 6 furred feet. Forever. Again, diction. Infinite, crawling, dragging, forever. This laborious foreverness. Forever, whatever. And there we go. And then I say, we kind of go through our mantra again. What does this mean? What does this mean? And I always say, this is the first thing they get. They're kind of frustrated with Annie Dillard when I teach it, because they're like, well, who cares about this moth? And you say, it's not about a moth. What's this about? And they go, I don't know. Do not ever, ever, ever let them say, I don't know after you've close read. Because they know. They just lazy. Go back. Look at stuff you circled. Look at ideas you saw. I had this moth that was supposed to be pretty. I saw that with my imagery. And then I had all of a sudden like this really violent diction. And then I have like this uber violent diction. It's all about like creating a monster. And then it's this monster forever. What is this about? You tell me. What is Annie Dillard writing about? Life is messy. That's a great thesis. Maturing isn't easy, and I think we all know that, and they all know that too. Annie Dillard wrote an entire piece, and they found out, because of imagery and diction, that maturing isn't easy, and that the ignorant interventions of someone who means well can have permanent, horrible, destructive consequences. Now you have a really awesome discussion on your hands, because you close read. And the words that are going to come out of their mouth when they say, you can tell that Annie Dillard is talking about permanent damage someone caused because of her diction, these kids are going to blow your mind. They write unclearly and they have unclear thoughts because they read unclearly. If you're sick of horrible writing, do close reading.